Good evening. Thank you for making the time to see us. My name is Jog Dhody. I'm the CFO of Blancco. I've been with the group for 4 years. I helped identify the acquisition and helped acquire it back in April 2014, and we paid £50 million at that point. Obviously, a lot's gone on in the market over the last few days. I would like you to take away from this presentation that my belief that this potentially is a Brexit resistant stock. And that's a term I heard for the first time this morning when I was seeing some analysts. And I did prepare this deck before the Brexit happened. So I'll cover the deck, and then I've got a few additional points I can cover regarding our mix of business and our currency exposures and things like that. And that'll demonstrate why I think we're potentially pretty resistant to a Brexit. So all the usual caveats apply. So a number of you wouldn't have seen us before, so I'll cover what we do. So we have a disruptive information security play. That's a very hot topic these days for corporates, consumers, and the market. We think there's a very large addressable market for our product, $2 billion, and that's on the very prudent side, that estimate. We have the global leadership position. We've demonstrated good growth for the last 17 years. That growth has accelerated over the last 4 years, and I think there's opportunities for that growth to accelerate further over the next few years. The cash generation is strong, the profit is strong, and that's pretty unusual for a software business. I've gone out and benchmarked our business against software businesses both in the UK and the US, and a combination of strong organic growth, strong profit margin, and strong cash generation. That's pretty unique. And we've got, what I would describe as the best global team in the information security place. They've been recruited from around the world, and they're all experts in their field. And I'll put some pictures up a bit later. So why do corporates, and we're a B2B company, we're not a B2C company. Why do corporates buy our software? Well, they buy it for security purposes. So why is that important? Well, you've all seen examples of legislation, litigation. You've seen examples of corporates losing their customer data, and it's very damaging to their brands if they do that. So one of the key things you can do to help manage your data is just delete it when you finish using it. So that's one thing. The second thing is every one of us has got several devices in our hands, in our pockets, in our laptop bags or whatever, they're all those people that are working in corporates. Those devices have data on it that's of vital importance to that corporate, and really important as a corporate you manage that data. I make sure that all our own employees use our Blancco software for exactly that reason. Compliance is the next reason. There's particular sectors that particularly have very specific rules there about managing data. So think the banking sector, think the government space, think healthcare. All of these parts of the world have their own specific legislation. In the financial services industry, there's specific rules about you can keep data for 7 years and then you should be destroying it. And what our software allows those corporates to do is manage part of their policy around data destruction. We're the sort of digital file destruction and the shredder of the modern world. And then the third thing, both from an environmental point of view and an asset valuation point of view, if you've got a second-hand device that's got data on, well, absolutely, you can destroy the device physically. You can crunch it, you can put it through an X-ray machine, you can hammer it, but it won't work again, and therefore you can't resell that device. And these bits of servers that will help erase, they could be sort of $80,000, $100,000 even in the second-hand market. So they're very valuable. So that's the objective for a corporate. Our 3 routes to market are here. The business started 17 years ago focusing on the IT asset disposal part of the world. That was sort of, when we bought this business 2 years ago, it was about 90% of its revenue. So these are companies, and I put the names here, like Arrow, like Orknet. These are multi-billion-dollar businesses. So they'll take your device once it's finished in your hands, and they will repurpose that device. So what does that mean? So you've got an iPhone 5. It's September. The new iPhone comes out. You'll go back to Vodafone store and you'll say, can I have the new iPhone 6 or 7 or whatever the number is? And they'll take your iPhone 5 back off you and give you £200 or £300 for it. As a consumer, you want to know that that device, when it gets resold in the second-hand market, has been properly managed in terms of deleting your personal details off there, deleting your children's pictures, deleting your banking details. And that's what these IT asset disposition companies do. They run a process where they'll physically take the device, they'll clean it from a physical point of view, so they'll make it look like new, they'll repackage it, they'll put the new software on, and they'll also run our Blancco software to erase that data. The IT asset disposition market is got about 600 providers in the world. They're all very large. We're the brand standard in those companies. We're in 550 of them. Today, we've focused, or up until the last 2 years, we've focused on growing our revenue in these two new spaces. On the right-hand side is enterprise. Enterprise is our direct corporate customers. Again, some of our direct corporate customers that are very focused on managing their data. These will include customers like BMW and Roche Pharmaceuticals, where they are, and they're generally where they need to be compliant with specific sector legislation. That is now about a third of our revenue as of today. The final source of our revenue is through service providers, and these are examples of IBM, HP, and these kind of sit in the middle. Now these are companies that will provide the entire IT infrastructure for large corporates. They'll provide the hardware, they'll provide all the back office support, and as part of that, as a value-added service, they might well erase the data on those devices either at their end of the life or when they're moving from one employee to another. And they'll use our software to do that. And those revenue streams are nicely balanced now. As of today, they're about a third, a third, a third. What I'd like to see our business do is grow these two areas some more, so this becomes the even more dominant part of our business. As you move to the right, the complexity of the problem of managing the data increases, as well as therefore our price point and therefore our margin. And this is an example how Blancco would be used in an iPad. This is a picture of an Arrow warehouse. So they've purchased and are about to resell a bunch of laptops. That red and white screen, there's the Blancco software. So these laptops are lined up. The Blancco software is plugged into their server. They plug these laptops in, and then you run a process. A laptop eraser takes 2 minutes. And that device comes out the other end, comes out with a certificate, and that certificate says this has been erased to the relevant local standard, and there's 35 standards globally, and we keep that certificate forever. And the customer can keep it as well. So if there's ever any pushback, if there's any ever litigation, that iTag can demonstrate that they have properly handled that data. This is how our software would get used in a corporate environment. This, as it happens, is one of our customers, which is BMW. And this is to demonstrate the complexity of it. So on the top left, there's the different device types that they have. They have desktops, laptops, servers, thumb drives, mobile phones, iPads, and not just Apple phones, but Samsung devices and HD devices. There's a huge range of devices out there, and we need to be able to do all of them. As a corporate user, you want a one-stop solution to manage all your devices. The second problem for a BMW is they're in all the different countries of the world, and each country has its own particular rules and regulations about how you manage data and what standards you have to apply. So in the UK, you've got to abide by the rules and the approach that the data protection legislator in the UK sets. In South Africa, it's different. In North America, it's different. In Germany, it's different. And we've got to comply with all of those. So to take the pain away from the customer, they use our software. And there's 35 accreditations globally that allow us to demonstrate to our customers that we've done that. We've got more accreditations than any one of the competitors in the market. And the number 2 player in the market was Tabanus, which we actually bought last September, and they had 5 accreditations. These are the pictures of the accreditations here. So there's ESA, which is in Europe. There's ADISA. This is the NATO one. There's a bunch of them, and you can see them on our website. And as a corporate buyer, as the CIO, the CTO of a Vodafone or a BMW, when you look on the side of the Blancco box, it's got the most ticks, and that gives you a lot of comfort and sleep easy at night. The new problem that's coming is cloud environment. So a lot of corporates these days, and indeed a lot of consumers, aren't storing data physically on their own hard drives or their own physical servers or a box in the corner of the office. They're now storing them in the cloud environment. So you guys will use Dropbox, you'll use Hotmail, you'll use Amazon Web Services. That data's in the cloud. So what you need to do as a corporate when you manage that data is you can't delete the whole server because you're sharing that server with a bunch of other corporates. So what that's called is a partial erasure, and our software can provide that partial erasure solution. We're the only company in the world that can do this partial erasure. The other sort of recent development is, you could probably just about see it here and here, is there's new types of memory coming out. So, you know, not even 3 or 4 years ago, you'd switch on your laptop and you'd hear a whirring sound of the laptop firing up. That's because it'd have a magnetic hard drive in it. That magnetic hard drive is actually not that complicated to erase. If you turn on your new sleek laptop now and get mine out and demonstrate it, or your iPad or your phone, you don't hear any sound really. That's because it's got no moving parts. It's got a new type of memory in it called SSD, which is solid state. It's a solid state device, solid state memory. And that's electronic memory, and it's encrypted. 70% of the devices in the world in the next 3 years will have solid state memory on. All of you will move to thinner laptops. The reason solid state memory is becoming popular is, well, it doesn't get wiped when you put it through an X-ray machine at in an airport, which is quite important. But more importantly, it's got no moving parts in it, so it doesn't need cooling. It's very light. It doesn't, get damaged when you drop your device. And most devices will move to solid state memory. For those same reasons, most server environments will also move to solid state memory. Why is that important? Well, we hold a patent on the erasure of solid state memory. We got that patent in Europe in September last year, and we got it in North America in January or February this year. So as far as we're concerned, no other competitor can go out and erase solid state memory, and certainly not using out the process that we use. We're in the process now of doing two things. One is extending that patent to cover other countries, and think China, think Australia, think New Zealand. And also we're testing that. And there's a few small players in the market that say they do SSD erasure. I don't know whether they actually do it yet, but we're starting to test that in a legal way. And we might go after them because they're now breaching our patent that we've been awarded. And this is how the CTO of a BMW would employ our software. So we have something called a management console. It's effectively a one web-based view of their organization. And from that web-based view, their IT department can push our software through the cloud if they want, or through a physical means, to every different device type that they've got, to individual files and folders if they don't want to erase the whole device, but a small part of it, to their servers and their cloud environment. This management console will also store your erasure certificate, which is your proof forever that in the event of a problem, that device was erased. And we store a variety of details about that device. So that's the business. This is talking a little bit about the market. So we worked with two companies. One was Gartner and one was IDC. And I don't know if you guys know them, but Gartner and IDC are the leading organizations in the IT environment in terms of helping you to do research. And they concluded that there's 2 billion devices a year reaching their end of life across the world, right? And it's not an unrealistic assessment. If you think there's sort of 6 billion people in the world, most of them have got some device, or in my case about 10. And every few years you'll replace the device. So 2 billion devices end of life every single year. We charge about $1 erasure. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, depends on the complexity. So we size the market as being $2 billion a year. And right now, our revenue is 30 million. So what our challenge is we need to go and get the rest of that orange space. Now, how can I tell you with the market leader when that orange space is sort of empty? Who's doing it? What's happening? How's it getting covered? Well, these are what's happening. So the first thing is most organizations or individuals like you and me are probably ignoring the problem. How many of you have upgraded from one for another to another and just kept your old phone in the drawer because you're too scared to give it away? We've all got drawers full of old phones. So that's the ignore button. And you can do that as a consumer, but as a corporate, when you've got hundreds of thousands of devices coming back every year as you upgrade your IT technology, you can't just ignore the problem. You can't just put it all in the cupboard. You've got to deal with it. So some corporates will physically destroy the device. There's no record that they actually did that, though. It's not very environmentally friendly. So we need to educate the market and CTOs in terms of it's not acceptable to ignore this problem anymore. We need to educate the market that there's a better way than physically destroying the data. The third thing that we need to overcome is a bunch of corporates and consumers like you and me who actually think we're doing the right thing. So this is a picture of an Android operating system, and it says factory data reset. And it says erasing data, doing this erases all the data on the phone. This is the Windows format box. If you format your hard drive, it says it erases all the data on the device. It absolutely doesn't. The same applies to iOS as well for your Apple. If you factory reset your phone or format your drive, the data's still there. You just can't see it. As a hacker, you can go and get that data. The analogy we use to explain it in dead simple terms is imagine a book. All doing that factory reset or formatting does is take the contents page out and the index page out. All the data's still there. And corporates think they're doing the right thing. You and I as consumers probably think we're doing the right thing, but it doesn't actually erase the data. That's pretty worrying. So we've got to do a bunch of education. And these are the two things that are really helping us and giving us a great tailwind. One, there's a bunch of legislation coming down the pike. This legislation covers different industries. There's a PCI standard in financial services. There's a bunch of ISO standards. There's a new European legislation called GDPR that applies to any business that's doing any work in Europe. They need to apply this legislation. If you don't and you manage data badly, you get very significant fines. We're talking 5% global revenue. It's a pretty significant number. Then you've got a bunch of litigation. Think Talk, think Ashley Madison, think Target. All this litigation is an evidence of consumers saying, look, it's unacceptable for you to lose my data or mismanage it. And corporates are losing billions of dollars of brand value if they get this wrong. So these are the two things that are helping us overcome those problems I just described. So that's the business and the opportunity. I'm an accountant, so I can't not talk about numbers, but the revenue growth is good. We'll close this year. I'm not supposed to talk to you about our numbers yet, but we're looking in good shape, and it's good growth. That's all organic. Gross margin's good, our cash gen's good, our EBITDA margin's good, so the numbers are all good. This is a bit more about the growth trend. This growth trend is our sort of half-year performances for the last 8 periods, picking up in the right direction. This is our year-on-year growth numbers. We were doing 20-odd% growth, we're now doing 30s and 40s. We're in good shape. We've invested a lot, but we're throwing back great revenue off. And that's the summary. I said I'd talk 2 minutes on Brexit. So what are people asking me? So they're asking me how much of your revenue comes from the UK? 10%. Okay, 90% of our revenue comes from outside the UK. I've been asked what our mix of currency is. So we get a lot of income in US dollars, about 25 to 30%, in euros, in yen. Those sort of three main currencies represent about 70% of our revenue. The GBP is about 15%. I've been asked about, will the change in the UK coming out of Europe affect our ability to sell the software? Well, if you believe that all the software sales is only being driven by legislation, then yeah, it might well affect it in the UK, which is 10% of the revenue. But I don't believe that's the case. I think a lot of UK corporates are worried about the litigation and the consumer brand damage and things like that. So I'm not particularly worried about our UK business. And as I said, it's only 10% of our revenue. And don't forget, those UK businesses almost all international, and they're all doing business in Europe, and that legislation still applies to them whether the UK is in Europe or not. If you're doing business in the EU, you need to pass this legislation. So I think I'm not massively worried about the Brexit, and in fact it should benefit us. Well, why should it benefit us? Well, most of our earnings aren't in sterling, and as the GBP declines, the pound gets weaker, our earnings in all the other currencies are actually worth more. So in theory, our sterling revenue and profit should go up.